For those of you who don't know me, my name's Ed DeLange. I'm a drinker of fine whiskies, a consumer of interesting foods, um, a, a crazy water sports enthusiast, and a sucker for various committees. Um, what you just did, shaking your neighbor's hand, was quite a tradition in a number of old school church services. Still shaking hands. Oh, that's good. That actually means it's really working. But yeah, it was a tradition in church services, usually followed by peace be with you. But don't worry, I'm not going to start preaching yet. But I would like to question, how many of you know your actual neighbor's name, 2 doors down, 3 doors down, at the end of the block or the street? Communities as we know it, communities as we know it have changed drastically. Our walls have gotten higher, our friendliness and patience less. I admit I don't know many of my neighbors. I can't tell you any of my street's gossip or where to get the nearest cup of coffee for a couple of reasons, mostly because I've just moved into the area and I don't actually end up spending much time at home. My downtime is usually spent either with an arts crowd, surrounded by water sports enthusiasts, or people like you, keyboard crusaders. Being the sucker that I am, I land up on committees in mass, but weirdly, I seem to quite enjoy it. Not quite sure why. I've been on boards of committees, mostly non-profits, some which are older than 100 years since high school. They range from anything from a symphonic orchestra, art centers, sailing, diving clubs, and of course, technical communities. In a typical Durban fashion, for those of you who don't know, Durban is a little, well, not that little city. It's the third biggest city in South Africa on the East Coast. But in a typical Durban fashion, we had a training session hosted by INX ZA. This was the first real get-together we had in ages in the technical community since the Linux user groups went quiet, the local programmers' art went the way of the dodo, and the first hackerspace in South Africa that never quite got a space meant eventually people started losing interest. So our technical community was in dire states. With some gentle nudging, we agreed we would start a regular gathering in Durban, and things just flew from there. I think, like many communities and interest groups and activity groups, our biggest problem was our big brain drain from the smaller cities to either abroad or the big traffic jam known as Johannesburg. It is a big traffic jam, you can't deny. Our idea was by having more meet space get-togethers, this would reduce and we'd be able to retain some of them and eventually grow the community properly in Durban. Excitingly, we had the bigger part of the community interested, ready, and eager, a couple of brave and keen pioneers. Due to my affiliation with the local yacht club, Point Yacht Club, I had a very cost-effective venue, and it had that lovely, cold, golden, frothy stuff that came from a tap that we all know our community seemed to run on, along with snacks and good fast Wi-Fi. Squire Donald and I got the ball rolling with some fun stuff, feedback from AFPIF of, 2 years ago, I think it is. We might have stolen a slide or two from KZNNOG, and moving forward, we scratched together a wiki, a website, and a mailing list and became legit and, well, kind of grown up. We landed our first sponsor quite quickly, AdBreak. Thank you to CCOM. They came on board and things just went very positive from there. And after the success of our first event, we lined up sponsors for the next 2 years. When people see something good happening and it's good for everyone, people tend to jump on the bandwagon and they crawl out of the funniest places of the woodwork. But I believe the trick of this balancing act of keeping the sponsors there is not to be greedy. From the onset, we realized there's a definitive need for workshops and training sessions. We partnered with InkZA for the first session, and we then hosted our own one last month. Because we understand the pressures of modern day living, people couldn't really commit to 2-day or 3-day training sessions, so we squeezed it into a smaller half-day stints. And it seemed to suit most of our clan better. After chatting to some of the Afrinic guys, it seems that the new way is to basically have small hackathons to help people get their routers in practice up and running, and everyone to help each other. So I think that's what we'll end up trying next. From a management perspective of the NOG, well, we'd never really formed a formal committee. Donald and I used it as an excuse to go for a beer every second week or so. And we loosely planned what we want to do, pop some messages out while we're sitting and having a beer, and what we can do better at the next event. I guess our biggest problem was, well, and still is to get speakers for the next event. And I think that's a problem with most organizations like this, because volunteers are not very forthcoming at the moment. But with some gentle nudging, one gets there. We have sometimes had to forcefully volunteer people to come and have a talk, and, well, it seems to work fine. And the people didn't get too grumpy with us. Since Durban is a fairly small community, I think there's about 25 odd operators based in Durban itself, at least with the head offices there. And I think we've caught the bulk of these. I think there's still some more we can push, especially more out in the far-reaching areas. Our real next step is, as I said, the pioneers in the small towns that get zero love from any of the big operators. But for most of them, transport is a problem because our province is fairly big. And I think our furthest visitor was from a place called Ladysmith, which is a good 3.5 hours drive. And as we run evening events, transport can be a problem for them. So we are looking at live streaming as an alternate. Other issues, I guess, since we're fairly new and we haven't hit any real problems. From prior experiences with other communities, the key to surviving is keeping it community run. We mustn't lose focus, shouldn't make it get too big, and we have to learn to delegate, which is a problem for everyone, because sometimes it's easiest just to do it oneself, but that does not work in the long run. And it will become a one-way road to failure. This wasn't a Hollywood or a Disney where everything is all rosy and happy. It is inevitable that someone's life will intervene and, well, people might move away, new jobs, get a family, or things will happen. So delegation helps the continuity. It's easy to understand that, but quite difficult sometimes to implement. And yeah, but I implore everyone, please go out there, start your own small communities in your local areas, because for everyone to get together at events like these are nice. But I mean, how many actual foot warriors do you end up getting at these bigger events? It's the small events where the big change ends up happening. If we all focus on making the small communities work in the local areas, then the communities will grow in the sort of the regional areas, or even on a national basis. So we have to all push from the bottom up. Doing it from the top down will never really work. So try it. Start, even if it's 5 or 6 people getting together in your area on a Saturday morning or a Sunday morning for a cup of tea, or in the afternoon for a drink. If you get your local communities running, in the long run, it will kind of work out. So please go out and try it. And I seem to have lost the slide. I have no idea what happened to the rest of the slide or my notes. So that went a bit quicker than I thought. Does anyone have any questions? Has anyone else got regional communities like ours is based in a provincial area? Is there anyone else who's tried this, and have you had problems, successes, and what do you guys need to get it running? Because I think the small regional communities can learn from each other. So I see a couple of people nodding heads there, so please come have a chat.
Hello. Yes. Hi, Ed. Thanks for the talk.
Just remind us who you are for the
My name is
remote
Anas.
viewers.
Anas from Nairobi. We run KZNNOG in the city. And I guess one of the challenges is rallying people to come together and do something, have an activity, a common activity. How do you guys get around that? How do you reach out to the people?
So we were fortunate enough to have like remnants of old communities running it around. Like we had a local wireless user group, the Linux user group, and we sort of touched into everyone like that. And as I said, CCOM came on board. They sponsored us some money for some snacks and for some drinks, which is an easy motivation for people to get out of the house sometimes. and that we use as our catalyst to get everyone together. And yeah, we currently sort of get 40 to 60 odd people out or RSVPing for the events, and then we lose about 10 of those to come. But the snacks, I think, was snacks and beer was the hook.
Okay.
So yeah.
Also, what are some of the key wins from this this NOG? So what are some of the things that you guys have been able to achieve?
That was actually the slide I missed. Thank you. So probably the biggest effect we noticed was the local peering community improved. Because we sort of like help each other, nag each other. Many people, for example, did not realize that Cloudflare, for example, they do not peer with root servers. So they all woke up suddenly and started peering with the root servers. And there's a continuous community building with that. So I wouldn't say it. It's just that the community is helping it. It's become a, to the slide if I skipped it. I think it might have been that one and I lost some notes, but we did remote talk. So as I said, Cloudflare did our first remote talk, and well, it was just roundabout when the Cloudflare node went live in Durban, and people learned from that. So the peering community grew. Peers who were based in Durban, who all peered in Johannesburg, only slowly started peering down in Durban again. And because some of them didn't actually see the point of peering locally, which was a big thing for us. And the other big thing is the community started working together from a commercial perspective. For example, there's a group of people at the moment who are trying to buy long distance fiber in sort of a consortium affair, which I think would bring the long haul fiber down, cost substantially down. I think it's by a factor of about 10 for a factor of 10 times for a 10 gig service. So that's made, it's differences like that. People are willing to work together after seeing each other over a beer, basically. No longer just a name on an email. Any other questions? Oh, Donald, yes? Or are you coming to chase me off stage? Oh, okay. Well, yeah, thank you.